didn't invite anyone, but I invite all the elder people, educated people.
Wonderful.
So these people, they can pass the message to other people. So
Absolutely. I see a
you
lot
will
of
get a lot of
Yeah.
questions. Okay, so waxaan idin jooga maanta representativekeenii waa ninkii sirka joogay wax allaala waxaad su-aal qabtaan ama guri ha noqoto ninka hore waxa waa heer degmo ninkan waxa waaye waa state lacagta ma jirtan waa stateka wax qabad ma jiro waa stateka housing waa stateka marka afkiina furta insha allah diyaar idin yahay welcome first you can introduce on your policy and why we elected again tell us something okay
Great. Well, thank you all for coming. I feel like I cheated a little bit because I got to listen to Randy talk for a little while. So my name is Andy Smith. I have served for 2 years so far in the Minnesota House. We've done a lot of really amazing things in those 2 years. It sounds like we'll talk about housing a lot. We've done some good things in housing. There's still a lot more we need to do. We've done a lot to help students fund education like we haven't in a long time. There's still more to do. Universal breakfast and lunch at school is something we passed last couple years, which is great. Paid family and medical leave. A lot of stuff that we can maybe talk about depending on if you have questions about that. I do want to make one really great announcement. One thing we did during the last 2 years up at the Minnesota House is, and someone asked the question, I think that gentleman back there asked a question about this, of how can we ask you questions outside of just these forums? So our legislative office, we actually, for the first time, at least that I'm aware of, we gave funding to them for language services. So starting in January, all of my newsletters that go out from my office will also be available in, let me see if I get these languages right, Somali. It will also be available in Arabic and Spanish, as well as English, which is what it went out in before. And you can respond to those emails in the same language. Someone who speaks that language will translate it for me, and I will be able to respond to that. So that is a resource I hope your community and a lot of other communities here in Rochester use quite a bit, again, starting in January. So I might work with Omar and Salah to make sure you all have access to that when that goes live. But what I can say is that our conversation is not going to end here tonight or the next time that I'm coming to ask for a vote or anything along those lines. Hopefully, we continually have a dialogue as you have questions. So that's probably a good start, and then I can ask specific questions or answer specific questions you all might have.
marka hore uu ku mahadsan yahay Andy Smith runtii waa xildhibaan nagu matala golaha muxuu ahaa xildhibaanka gobolka Minnesota wuxuu ka soo galaa xaafadaha NATO North Eastiga and part of Northwest, right?
Kind of central and part of the north as well.
Ha ilaa laga soo gaaro downtown-ka gaaradiisa marka qeybaha dhexe magaalada Rochester ayuu u yahay xildhibaan xaafadaha saytinta badan laakiin de markii la isku xiray suutan xildhibaantada badan aqalka Minnesota noo fadhiya aqalka hoose wuxuu ka hadlo waxyaalo badan sanankii hore u meel maray sida arrimaha guryaha hadda ka hadasheen halkii bilyan la meel mariyay su'aalaad ka weydiin doontaan sidoo kale paid family leave qofka shaqeeyo inuu fasax qaadan karo shaqadiisa oo mushaharkiisana u soconaya shaqooyinka xaq u leeyahay oo soo u daryeelo qofka asaga xanuunsan mise qofka xanuunsan ehelkiisa waalid ilmo inuu daryeeli karo mushaharkiisa u socon karo runtii sidoo kale in ilmaha cunto la siiyo iskuulaadka oo lacag laga qaadin free lagu wada siiyo iskuulaadka iskuulka rabaan ha dhigtaan laakiin in muxuu ahaa cuntadooda la siinayo free tahay sidoo kale waxbarashada muxuu ahaa heerka jaamacadaha dadka qaarkood inkamkooda soo gaarsiin yahay meesha loogu talagalay in laga wada bixiyo inay gaarsiisan tahay marka arrimaha la mid ah iyo su'aalaha idinkeedna insha Allah in idinka jawaabo oo muxuu ahaa runtii asleedin waa idinku taagan yihiin. And I'm going to start with the housing. So that's always the burning question. We have passed $1 billion, which was a great work, but that billion, we haven't had that much information, how it was divided, what's going on with it. And also part of that was going to be maybe first-time home buyers being able to be helped with no interest, be able to buy a home, but also down payments as well. If you can shed light to it, what that process with Minnesota Housing Finance, what they're doing about it and what's happening, disseminating that. So if you can share that aspect of it and what more can be done in the next legislature that's planned to improve and increase that funding basically.
Yeah. So housing is a big question. Thank you for asking that. So as we said, we did make a first step, but that's all it is, a first step last session with that $1 billion in funding. And that $1 billion is broken up into a lot of different smaller funds that do a bunch of different things. One is rental assistance. Which some of you may know about, some of you may not. In Rochester, actually, we have Olmsted County is the one who does that rental assistance program. generally, within a week of when they open it, applications are full and there's no longer availability for it. So I will speak, I'll kind of take this piecemeal and then maybe give you a chance to talk about each one. But one thing, speaking of forward, how we can do better down here in Rochester, we are the only city of the first class in Minnesota that doesn't have our own housing authority, which is generally the branch of government that deals with rental assistance. St. Paul has one, Minneapolis has one, Duluth has one. We don't. So Senator Bolden and myself and some other legislators are starting to talk about what it would look like to start that here in Rochester, which would allow more of that money for rental assistance to come to our area. So that's one thing. I have a lot to say, but do you want to do that and then I'll come back?
Yes. So qaybta koowaad arrinta gurigan ka weydiiyay bilinka la meel mariyay maxaaluqa qayb ka mid wuxuu yiri waxay tagaysaa qaybta looga caawinayo dadka dhanka kirada. Marka muxuu ahaa taas ka sokow sidoo kale Rochester ma laha qayb muxuu dhankaas u qaabilsan waax mise muxuu ahaa hay'ad dalada ka shaqeyso sida magaalooyinka qaarkood sida Minneapolis, St. Paul iyo Duluth saddexaad magaalo waaweyn ay leeyihiin inaysan Rochester lahayn barnaamijkaasi runtii aan u baahan weeyaan aniga iyo xildhibaanada kale aan ka wada shaqeyn doono oo muxuu ahaa arrintaasi wax looga qabto si aan u lahaano xafiis gooni oo hawsha u xil saaran dadka looga caawiyo dhibaato ka qaba kiradooda bixin la mise kirada ku taagan tahay mise culays ka saaran yahay.
So that's one aspect, rental. Secondly, I want to get to Salah's specific question on house or home ownership. Home ownership. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't own a home. I'm also a renter. And so I am sort of part of that younger class of professionals who we find buying houses inaccessible for us, which I know is an experience throughout Olmsted County. So one of the things we did was create a program to help with those down payments for first-time home buyers. Now, I will also say this is not something that the state should do by itself. The federal government also has a program that does this. It's actually normally pretty easier to get help from. And Vice President Kamala Harris has said she will help with down payments up to $20,000 if she's elected. So as with a lot of things, it's going to be a working with a lot of different branches of government. But we do have one of those programs here in Minnesota that we're trying to beef up. So again, we had made that first step where we have now created that program. When we go back this year, if I am elected and we are in the majority, we would like to increase funding for that, make it easier for people to get it. I also, well, I'll give you a chance to do one more.
wuxuu ka hadla qaybta koowaad oo dadka ka caawinaysa lacagta muxuu ahaa ee dhigaan marka ugu horeyso muxuu ahaa la dhaho muxuu ahaa down payment ugu horeyso ee ka caawinayso state-ka sidoo kale waxaa jirto yiri federaalka nafteeda lacag ay ayadana ku bixiso gabadha hadda u tartamaysa madaxweynaha ayadana ay ballan qaadayso inay 20,000 gaarsiin doonto qofka ugu horeeyo weligii aan guri gadan oo first time home buyer dadka loo yaqaano inay muxuu ahaa ayagana ku bixin doonaan taa marka taas ay qayb ka mid lacagtaanayto halka bil meel mariyay waan ku sii dadaalanaa inaan ballaarino lacagtaas aytana aan badino haddii ilaahay insha Allah. And just clarification, are those two fast down payments either the federal or the state, can they both qualify at the same time or just one or the other?
You can qualify for both, but I think it would be a very specific location because they have a lot of different rules that overlap. So I would say I think you're possible to qualify for both, but unlikely would be my answer.
waxaa weydiiyay su'aal labada ma wada heli kartaa midda state-ka midka federaalka haddaad fursadaas ay hesho wuxuu yiri waa macquul meelaha qaarkood meelaha degan laakiin badanaa marmar inaysan dhicin waa u badanayaa buu yiri laakiin de qof walba muxuu ahaa inuu fiiriyo muxuu ahaa apply gareeyo waa lama huraan.
The third big part of housing is we just need to build more housing. I'm sure I've had this experience looking for new housing. There's a lack of it here in Rochester. We're growing faster than we're building houses. So a large part of that $1 billion that we passed last year at the Minnesota House or in the legislature was not necessarily immediately to give relief to people who are renting, but to builders to encourage them to build more housing. And I will say specifically to build housing across the board. Single family homes by themselves, to build more apartment buildings, both that people can rent and also that they can buy. And there's specific provisions also for multi-generational housing, which is something that we as a state generally have not done a very good job at providing. Providing areas where people can live with multiple members of family at the same time, multiple generations if they're looking after parents or grandparents maybe are looking after children during the day. So a big part of the money that we passed last time is to encourage builders to build more housing. And that's something we also want to make sure isn't just spent in the Twin Cities, where sometimes there's a lot of spending that doesn't trickle down to the South. We want to make sure that it gets down here to the South, which is, again, why a housing authority is something we would want to start for Rochester.
qayb ka mid a sidoo kale lacagta waxay ahayd in muxuu ahaa lagu dhiirigeliyo in la hormariyo oo la dhiso muxuu ahaa wuxuu yiri waxyaalaha qaarkood horta waxa qaali ka dhigaa guryo badan inaysan dhisneen guryaha marka in la dhiso la badiyo guryaha la dhisaayo kaliya ma aha kuwa muxuu ahaa houseyada loo yaqaan single family ga muxuu ahaa kaliya goonida u dhisan laakiin guryo waaweyn apartment la dhisi karo ayna gaari karaan heer inay dadka gataan guryo dhaxaltooyo leh multi-generation waxa la iska dhaxlayo dadkii muxuu ahaa gatay iyo ehelkooda iyo qayb ka mid ah xoog la saaro marka muxuu ahaa si loogu dhiso barnaamijkaas inta loo qayb qaato marka muhiimadda ugu weyn ee tahay xoog horta la saarayo guryo badan in magaalada laga dhiso lacagta inteeda badan aysan ku bixin muxuu ahaa Minneapolis oo iska ilaa muxuu ahaa koonfurta inta badan sida dhacdo sida Rochester magaalooyinkan inta soo jiro laakiin xoog aan ku saarino u dagaalamayno inay soo gaarto muxuu ahaa magaaladeena qayb weyn runtii ay ku baxdo dhismooyinkaas ayto
I think for another question or more on housing that I haven't touched on. My answer wasn't that good. Yeah, say it.
I think we need more of a 4-bedrooms apartments and townhomes. That's what it needs, Rochester. More of a 4 bedrooms. You guys are building a lot of apartments all over the city, but it's only 3 bedroom or 2 bedroom, you know. And there are a lot of families that wants to be together. They don't want to be separate. There are family like the grandparents are living in one room, and then the kids are living in the other room. It's like going back and forth. So, and most of us, they don't want to buy because of the interest.
Sure.
You know. Yep. So more of a 4-bedroom or townhomes for rent.
Yes. So so you touched on 2 things there that I think are really, really good. Thank you for that question. Do you want to translate the question, or should I?
I'll translate.
Okay. So first off, kind of the multi-generational piece was a part of what you're talking about there. Not necessarily because sometimes it's just big families, but bigger places where people, families can live together of all different kinds. 100% agree with that. And we do have basically incentives for builders to build those homes more. Randy might have said this before I got here or not. One of the hardest parts about that, unfortunately, is zoning, because you probably have been aware of this. Sometimes neighborhoods are very protective of kinds of homes that can be built in those locations. So one thing we tried last session that we didn't quite get across the line, but we might try again this next time, is basically to take away a little bit of the abilities of local cities to restrict housing in such a specific way. Their zoning power basically not that quite have so much. Cities didn't like that, which is one of the reasons why we couldn't come to an agreement and get that across the line. But that's something we would like to do. The second part of your question that you kind of touched on is interest-free or halal loans. This is something that we've talked about at the Capitol for a while, because Minnesota doesn't do it very well. And other parts of the country has figured out how to offer those loans well. There's actually a company out of Chicago that not I personally, but someone in the legislature was trying to get a bill to have them come to Minnesota. So I don't have necessarily a solution for that quite yet, only to know that we know that we're not doing that well, and we're trying to find solutions to that. Some of that might be kind of what we talked about earlier, some of the programs to help with down payments, maybe expanding those to be full mortgages that are interest-free or halal in some way to help with that. So that's not something we've passed, but it's something we're trying to work on, as I think the best I can say there.
Even the townhomes are only 2 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And the basement, there's no basement.
Yeah.
So you cannot put anybody in the basement. And if there's only 2 bedrooms, then that's not practical.
Yeah. bigger townhomes is something I wish to see too. Yep.
سعيد سؤال حويديسay muhiim ah sida anaga noqosaysa si qoysaskeena waaweyn magaalada guryaha laga dhisay inta badan waa guryo yar yar hadda laba qol marmar qaarkood saddex qolna aragto waa laga yaabaa laakiin say u badan waa laba qol ilaa qol sidoo kale guryaha townhouse-yada saas oo kale waa la mid ah la dhisaayo marka arrintaas sayto muxuu ka qabanayaa qaybtaas sayto asagana uu ku jawaabay muxuu ahaa waxa ugu badan ay ku dadaalayeen kaliya ma aha un qoysasku waaweyn laakiin familiyada inay isu dhowaadaan isla degaan oo runtii iska warqabaan waa muhiim buu leeyahay hataa aan ku dhiirigelinayno in dowladda ay ku bixiso lacag dadka guryaha dhiso shirkadka waaweyn inay dhisaan guryo ballaaran oo waaweyn oo runtii qayb weyn ay ka qaataan sidii loo helo guryaha qolalka badan oo la dhisay ay ka shaqeeyaan marka wuxuu yiri dhanka the interest free mise xalaal muxuu ahaan ribo lahayn sida lagu helo wuxuu yiri state-kan uu ka gaabay gobolkeena gobol kale way jiraan hadalkaasna uu ka socdaa muxuu ahaa baarlamaanka marka waan ku dadaalaynaa inaan muxuu ahaa bal wixii aan ka qaban karo laakiin hadda jawaab uma hayo laakiin inaan muxuu ahaa waxba ka qaban ilaa hadda waan ognahay buu yiri aan isku dayayno kolbo hadalkan uu noo socdaa.
Any other questions on housing? Anything, but maybe before we move on from housing.
My housing also housing me. So are we done with housing? Should we move on? All right. So and also I want to acknowledge that Jen and Cook are here with us from school board. So and they will be talking about referendum. So I just wanted to acknowledge they're here with us, school board members. So good to see you guys and thanks for coming and being with us. Waxay ka socdaan golaha muxuu ahaa waxbarashada ayaga waan la hadli doonaa insha Allah haddii la yiraahdo marka inaan ayadan muxuu ahaa meesha ku muujiyo haddii la yiraahdo. So now we can move to the school. They are ready today to give us presentation. Yes.
Super. I would like to have one question for him.
Two more questions. سؤال الغى وحيد.
We have to ask a question.
Go ahead.
anaga Soomaali haddaan nahay meeshan aan degannahay caruuraan ku wada leenahay caruurtana waa soo wada koraya kulliba marka state of Minnesota especially city Olmsted County waxay samaysteen low la dhahayo haddii ay isqabtaan cunuga iyo waalidka waxay u samaysteen guddi la dhahayo panel ka kooban 9 qafood ay ka kooban yihiin waxay isugu jiraan jinsi kasta macnaha waddankan jinsi kasta macnaha markaan waa fahmi kartiin midin si jincinay marka 9 qafood ayaa haddii cunug iyo waalidkiis ay isqabtaan go'aan ka gaarayo go'aanka ay gaaraan ayaa soconaya haddii cunuga iyo waalidka iyo cunuga ay isqabtaan haddii labada dhinac ay fiiriyaan ay soo baxdaataa 50-50 macnaha cunuga wuxuu sheeganayo oo guriga kaga cararayo in noqoto 50 aabaha wuxuu sheeganayo in noqoto 50 waxay leeyihiin oo cunuga aan la jirayna anaga aan badbaadinayna aan siinayna 51 marka aniga sida aan arkay practical aan u soo arkay caruur badan aan ku korsanayna meeshan meel lama u socono haddaan runta isu sheegno marka dadkan aan dooranayno waa inaan la xisaabtanaa guddigaas ay city register ay samaysatay oo 9 qafood ka kooban waxaa ku jira social worker ku jiro guddigaas ma arkaysid adiga social worker arkaysid ayaa idin dhaxay ayaga iyo guddiga social worker ka arkaysid sometimes they have the degree they don't know what they dealing they have bachelor or master degree lagu hire gareey and they don't have experience for the children marka taas boqolkiiba 99 qalad way marka waxaan codsanayaa aniga in state-ka maadaama ninkan uu ka tirsan yahay meeshii sharci dejinta inay arrimahaas ay involvement ay ku noqdaan sababtoo ah wax meesha yaallo wax la qaadan kara maaha markii familiyada la burburin waaya marka caruuraan ku wada korsanaa kulligan caruuraan dhalnay cunuga iyo waalidkiis waa isqaban karaan laakiin haddii lagu yiraahdo anaga waa caruurteen waa jecelnahay we love our children ma rabna caruurteen waalidku wuu qaldami karaa ma dhahay ma la qaldamayo laakiin habka guddiga boorkaas baanalka uu sameeyaa oo 9 qafood ka kooban waxba su'aalan ka qabaa haddii wax laga qaban karo oo kor laga socon karo waa inay fiiriyaan oo kuma tantahay
panel magaciisa ma taqaana panel magaciisa ma taqaana
panelku waxa samaystay city of waxa samaystay
county ma
waa child protection something way hada waalidka asagoo xuquuqdiisa leh oo lawyer qabsaday oo dawladda uu soo ogay dawladda hadii waalidku u badata state still will waa ka hor digaray maxaa la leasing card oo ku shaqaysanaysa marka waxaan u leeyahay dadkan waalidka cunuga hadda dad cunuga laga maqan cunugiina aabihi dambigu waa lagu waayay nadiif ku noqday cunugiina laga tagay cunugiina daarta ku dhacay markii ayaga soo daan marka hore loo sheegay macnaheed cunugiina dhageysanaysin boqolkiiba waa child white waa son white no that when the things comes 50-50 we have to protect the child. We know that. We agree that. We have to protect our child.
So basically, it's asking about there's a panel that is made of made of 9 people. So we don't know. He doesn't know exactly who is who, but made by the Olmsted County basically decide when there's a case of child protection.
Okay.
So when that case is brought to this 9 individuals, sometimes if even the case that was listened both back and forth between the parent and the child, sometimes it can be 50-50 the case. Usually they lean towards the child and give him 15% or her, whatever it is, and then taking that child out of the home, which means that this is more breaking the fabric of the family, which is something that really concerns to many of us. And sometimes some of the social workers are culturally not really sensitive to the situation, and our families are growing. We're having a larger population. The Rochester continues to grow, but in that aspect of it, so the social workers who are involved in these cases, you're not going to meet the 9 people, but there's always a between person, the social worker who's reporting these cases or maybe collecting this, because sometimes they're not familiar with the cultural sensitivity aspect of it, of the individual's religious beliefs or the cultural beliefs. And so every parent loves their child. Yes, sometimes not all parents are great parents, but sometimes there's also that aspect of it. So we understand that, but without dividing the families or breaking the family fabric, how do we make sure that there's policy that trickles down from that is similar, that is across the board through Minnesota? What is the role of legislation when it comes to protecting the families, making sure that families are intact together, they're supported, either rehabilitated or provided programs for them without even dividing the families, basically.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big question that I don't think I can answer perfectly tonight, but I think a couple things spring immediately to mind. One is continuing to make sure that there is the cultural competence to understand those differences, because there are a ton of different cultures in Rochester, in Minnesota, across our state, including our Native American populations as well, that have to get along in the same system that we're a part of. And so part of the ways that we can do that is make sure that we have diversity in who those social workers are at that time, and to make sure that if there's a case with specific cultural misunderstandings that are potentially able to happen, that there are social workers, resources that they can use to understand those situations. Now, without talking about something specific, I maybe can't get into specifically how that might work out, but that would be one area that we want to make sure that we have those resources for. And secondly, and this is maybe not exactly your question, but something that we worked on last session, which is at those very, very sad moments when a child is taken out of a home, maybe for the right reason. It's not a good situation. Something is happening in the family where they are unsafe. Making sure that children who come from those communities, those cultures, get a home that is also within those homes and cultures that are their own. And that's something that, again, is very hard to put into strict law, because as I'm sure many of you know as community leaders, every instance is delicate and different. But it is an emphasis that we're trying to focus on with Health and Human Services. So those are the two things that jump to mind. And I'm not sure exactly the board on the Olmsted County that you're referencing, but this is the first I've heard of it. So I'll look into that and maybe have a better answer next time specifically to how that board functions.
When the board gets a decision, they transfer it to the state, and the state abandoned the license of the person to the child.
Okay.
That's the case, because the state says we follow the rule they approve it.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. I'll look into that for sure. And this is the first I've heard of it. So thank you for bringing that up.
Go ahead. Thank you.
waxaan rabaa su'aalo u qabaa sharaxaynta dhan hadduu yahay seedkii hadduu yahay firiga hadduu yahay kawri hadduu yahay suul boorkaba oo sharaxaynta su'aalo u qabaa su'aashaas oo tahay aala waxay noo yimaadeen waqti electionka la joogo noo yimaadeen dabcan waqti waa ku yar yahay hadallo la soo jiida kale noo sheegaan maxay u awoodi waayeen inay masharaxiinta noo yimaadeen midterm kor kiibatan laba sano loo dooraa sanad markuu joogo inuu iyo noo yimaado maadaama community ballaaran aan nahay dhibaato badan inaysato iyadoo markaa inay noo yimaadeen wixii dhibaataheenna jiraayo maxay noo weydiin la'yihiin noogu yimaadeen kaliya maarta laba spiritka oo leesha la joogo kaliya.
So this question is not only just to you, but all candidates that come through our doors. So usually we see when it's last minute, last straw, elect me, put me in office, but then midway through the year, once they are in office, we hardly see them come to back. This is what I've accomplished, this is what I can do. And they tell us this glamorous information that they're going to do, all the things that they're going to do, all the issues they're going to work on. But then miracle doesn't happen, nothing happens. And then 4 years, 2 years is over, you come back. Can I get an election? The same issues or different issues and same glamour information. So what different are you going to do as Andy? And
Yeah, that's a good question. Politicians are known all over the world for making big promises and not delivering, right? And I'm probably not going to solve that. But I want to go back, and this might be a good way to close because I know our other leaders are here as well. I want to emphasize what I said at the beginning, which is starting in January, you can email my office, and I'll make sure that Salah has it, that Omar has my email address. You can email me in the language that you feel most comfortable communicating with. Doesn't have to be English. And we will get that translated. Because part of the problem is in this discussion, I can only talk generally, but as you all know, each issue is different. Each family looking for an apartment or each person dealing with maybe a family disagreement and what happens with that child is different, or run-ins with the police is different. So maybe to answer this question directly is, these next 2 years, when I'm in office, email me directly. Don't wait for one of these panels, which I'll still come to. But even before then, email me. We will contact with you again in the language that you are most comfortable understanding and try to find solutions for those individual problems. And also that helps me as a politician who's looking for solutions know how we can make bigger changes to help the most amount of people. And another big part of that is thank you for coming tonight to these sort of things. I know it's, you're taking time out of your day that you're all busy, and this really means a lot, so thank you.